founder of a growing fashion company. To the outside world, I had a happy marriage with Jason and a close bond with my younger sister, Madison. But on our anniversary, the two people I trusted most betrayed me in a way no one could imagine. They pushed me out of a helicopter over the snowy mountains of Aspen to cash in on a $5 million life insurance policy. They thought I was dead. But I survived, and I came back, right in the middle of the funeral they held for me. If you've ever been betrayed by the very people you love the most, used, discarded, and left for dead, this story is for you. Comment where you're watching from and subscribe to follow my journey. I'm reclaiming my voice, exposing the truth, and rebuilding a life not built on lies, but on strength, healing, and self-worth. My name is Emily Carter, founder and CEO of Carter Designs, an upscale fashion brand on the rise. To the public, I had the perfect life, a charming husband named Jason, who stood by my side at every event, and a sweet, brilliant younger sister named Madison whom everyone adored. We were the unbreakable trio, or at least, that's what I believed for years. It all started on a winter morning in Aspen. Jason had suggested we take a trip to celebrate our wedding anniversary. Madison, unusually eager, offered to come along, to capture the memories for you. When the helicopter landed in the snowy mountains, I had no reason to suspect anything. I thought it was a romantic gesture, a way to reconnect, to breathe new life into a marriage that had grown quietly distant. Jason fastened my harness gently, flashing me the same polished smile he used during company events. Madison hugged me tightly, her perfume overwhelming. "You deserve this day," she whispered, her eyes darting away too quickly. Something felt off, but I brushed it aside. Who would ever suspect their own sister? As the helicopter lifted off, I looked out over the snowy peaks, telling myself this could be a fresh start. Maybe I could forgive Jason for the coldness, for the unexplained absences. I turned to smile at him, but he sat still, arms crossed, staring out the window like I wasn't even there. Madison pulled out her phone. "Smile, sis," she said cheerfully, holding the camera up. I forced a smile, my gut tightening. Then she leaned in close, too close, her lips brushing my ear. "You've always been in the way," she whispered. Before I could react, I felt her hand shove hard against my shoulder. My body jolted. I looked at Jason, my husband, my supposed protector, but he just sat there, unmoved, eyes cold, arms folded like he'd been waiting for it. I fell. It wasn't an accident. It was calculated. It was murder. The wind howled as I plummeted, snow and sky blurring together. I opened my mouth to scream, but nothing came out. The roar of the rotors drowned it all. I felt like time fractured. But this wasn't the end. Not yet. By some miracle, I managed to grab hold of a thick tree branch. Pain exploded through my shoulder. But I stopped falling. I dangled there, gasping, the helicopter shrinking into the sky above, carrying away the people who had just tried to kill me. That moment, hanging between life and death, was when I understood everything. The smiles, the affectionate words, the sudden, forced trip, all of it had been part of a plan. Jason and Madison didn't just want me gone, they wanted to replace me, to take my company, to cash in on the $5 million life insurance policy that Jason had quietly increased without my knowledge. Using my forged signature, the moment my fingers clawed into the rough bark of that branch, I knew I had seconds, maybe less, before everything slipped away. The pain was white hot, a shockwave that radiated from my shoulder down through my ribs. Something had snapped inside me, maybe several things, but I held on. I didn't fall, dangling in the freezing wind, blood trickling down my temple. I hung there, half dead, fully betrayed. The whir of the helicopter blades faded into the sky above, taking Jason and Madison away, along with the life they tried to erase. My vision blurred, snowflakes danced like ghosts around me, and every breath was a knife in my lungs. But somehow, I pulled myself toward the trunk, inch by inch, gritting my teeth. I pressed my face into the cold bark and whispered to myself, "Not today. Not like this. Not for them." I stayed there for what felt like an eternity. My legs half buried in snow, shoulder dislocated, ribs likely cracked. I knew I couldn't stay long. The cold was creeping deeper by the minute, numbing the pain, but also threatening to steal my will. Sleep tugged at me like a lullaby. But I didn't sleep. I moved, not with grace, not with any kind of dignity. I dragged myself through the snow, my coat torn, jeans soaked in blood and ice, Every inch forward was a battle, my boots scraping the frozen ground. One arm limp at my side, the other barely functioning. I didn't have a destination. I only had one goal: survive long enough to be found. Or to find something, anything. The wilderness stretched endlessly in all directions. The only sounds were the crunch of snow beneath my trembling body and the wind howling like a warning. Time warped. I couldn't tell if hours had passed or minutes. My lips cracked from the cold. My breath came in short, ragged gasps. Then, just as I began to wonder if I'd hallucinated the whole thing, I saw it. A dark shape in the distance, half buried in snow. A cabin, old, weathered, probably abandoned, but it was something, summoning everything I had left. I forced myself forward. The closer I got, the more real it became. I could see the crusted frost on the windows, the warped wood of the porch. I reached the door and collapsed against it, pounding with what little strength remained. No one answered. I grabbed the knob, unlocked. The door creaked open, and a gust of warmth, or something close to it, washed over me. The inside smelled like old wood and stale smoke, but I didn't care. I stumbled in, letting the door fall shut behind me. My knees hit the floor with a thud. I was shaking, freezing, broken, but I was alive. Crawling across the floor, I spotted a rusty wood stove in the corner, a stack of dusty blankets, and, thank God, a first aid kit on a low shelf. My fingers trembled as I opened it, pulling out bandages, antiseptic, anything I could use. I worked through the pain, wrapping my leg, fashioning a sling for my arm. The whole time, flashes of memory flickered through my mind. Madison, as a child, curled up beside me during storms, whispering, "Don't leave me, promise." Her tiny fingers gripping mine. Her fear of thunder. I used to protect her. And now she had tried to kill me. The betrayal stung more than the wounds. I refused to cry. There was no room for tears. Only breath, only survival. When my body stopped shaking long enough to move again, I scanned the room. In one corner, I found a stack of firewood and an old box of matches. My fingers were stiff, but I managed to light a small fire in the stove. Heat crept slowly back into the room, thawing my frozen skin. The warmth made the pain worse somehow, like my nerves were waking up just to scream. I found a tattered coat hanging on a nail near the door and wrapped it around myself. Then I spotted a dusty rotary phone on the counter. It worked. Static crackled through the receiver. I couldn't call anyone. I didn't even know who to trust. But the signal meant I could access a connection. My phone, thankfully, had survived the fall. Barely. I connected to a local network and pulled up my email. That's when I saw it. A bank alert. A transaction was pending on the life insurance policy Jason and I had signed years ago. The payout had already been claimed. My name, Emily Carter, was listed as deceased. They hadn't even waited for a body. Hadn't even pretended to search. They filed the claim hours after I disappeared. And that's when something inside me snapped. Not in anger, not even fear. Something colder. Clarity. They didn't just want me dead, they wanted my story erased. My company, my name, everything I'd built, and I couldn't let that happen. I looked around the cabin again. It wasn't much, but it was a start. A place to regroup, to breathe, to plan. That night, I didn't sleep much. My body ached, my mind raced, but somewhere, amid the pain and the betrayal, a voice rose up inside me. A voice that said, "They thought you were gone. Let them keep thinking that, for now." I sat curled up in the tiny cabin, the fire crackling as warmth crept slowly back into my limbs. My hands were bandaged, my shoulder throbbed, but the heat in my chest wasn't from the flames, it was from the fire raging inside me. They didn't just try to kill me. Jason and Madison had prepared everything: the life insurance paperwork, the forged medical documents, the rehearsed grief. They didn't wait to search for my body. They filed the claim and spun their story, that I had spiraled, that I was unstable, that maybe I'd jumped. If I didn't act now, they'd take everything, my company, my name, and rewrite my legacy into a tragic footnote no one would question. I turned on my cracked phone. Miraculously, it still worked. My bank accounts were frozen. My name was tied to psychiatric evaluations I'd never agreed to. I had been erased, carefully, surgically. Then a message came through from an unknown number. "I know what they did. Meet me. I have proof." My breath caught. A trap? Maybe, but also the only lifeline I had. I messaged a location. a 24-hour diner on the edge of Denver. The kind of place where nobody asks too many questions and everyone minds their business. Before I left the cabin, I called Vera, my closest friend and longtime attorney. Emily? Her voice cracked. Oh my God, you're alive. They already held your funeral. I know, I said quietly. I need your help, but not a word to the press. Not yet. We met in the parking lot behind the diner. I stepped out of the shadows. And Vera gasped. Her eyes welled up but sharpened immediately. Do you have anything we can use? She asked. Not yet, I replied, but someone's meeting us. Says he has evidence. A few minutes later, a wiry man with messy hair and a nervous look walked in, scanning the room before settling into the booth across from me. I'm Daniel Pierce, he said. I used to work for Madison, thought I loved her. Once. I was stupid. I said nothing, letting him talk. She used me, had me move money, forge reports, deliver sealed envelopes to fake doctors. But I kept copies. I don't know why, maybe because I knew this would all come back to haunt her someday. What kind of copies? I asked cautiously. Bank transfers, emails between her and Jason. Audio, her saying, you were in the way. That the insurance was worth the risk. Vera leaned back, eyebrows raised. If that's true, we can hit them with attempted murder. Fraud, conspiracy. Where are the files? I interrupted. In a storage unit, he said, still under my name. Not far from here. I've paid the rent every month. I figured, someday, someone would need them. That someone might be you. The three of us drove there under cover of night. The sky was low and heavy with snow. When we opened the metal door, the sound screeched like a warning. Inside were dozens of boxes, neatly labeled. My name was on almost all of them. Vera and I tore through the documents, emails, contracts, falsified mental health records, insurance claim forms, and a paper trail showing Madison and Jason plotting everything. My signature was on documents I'd never seen. They'd even fabricated evidence that I was mentally unstable, all to justify collecting $5 million. I felt the air leave my lungs. My hands trembled. This is more than enough, Vera said, her voice low and fierce. Emily, we can take them down. But you have to show up. Publicly. I nodded. I'm not hiding anymore. The next morning, we filed an emergency petition with the court. Vera moved fast, freezing Jason and Madison's assets, pushing for a criminal investigation, and requesting an injunction to reinstate my authority at the company. But even that wasn't enough. I needed to show my face. They'd told the world I was dead. They'd staged grief, held a funeral, so I would give them one they'd never forget. The car came to a slow stop about a block away from the funeral home. I looked through the window and saw rows of vehicles lining the curb, reporters swarming the entrance, and people filing into the building to mourn me. I took a deep breath. There was no room for fear anymore. I had survived the fall, the freezing cold, and the betrayal. Now, I was back to take everything they tried to steal. You sure you want to do this? Vera asked from the driver's seat, her voice quiet but steady. I have to, I replied, gripping the folder tightly, the folder filled with proof. Emails, forged documents, financial trails. Everything Madison and Jason had used to kill me on paper was now what I would use to destroy their lies. I opened the door and stepped into the cold. Flashbulbs began flickering in the distance as some of the media caught sight of me. Slowly, suspicion turned to recognition. I walked toward the entrance. Inside, the atmosphere was heavy with artificial grief. Soft piano music played. White flowers were arranged on every surface. And in the front of the room, on an easel, was a blown-up photo of me, framed in black with bold gold letters beneath it, in loving memory, Emily Carter. Madison sat in the front row, dabbing her eyes with a tissue, leaning into Jason's shoulder like a grieving sister. Jason stood at the podium, mid-eulogy. Emily was an inspiration, he said, voice trembling just enough to sound sincere. She touched so many lives. Then I stepped through the doorway. The room went still. A glass dropped and shattered in the back. Somewhere, someone whispered, Is that Emily Carter? Madison's head jerked up, her face drained of color. Her mascara-streaked eyes widened in horror. Jason froze mid-sentence, mouth hanging open, unable to form another word. I walked slowly and deliberately down the aisle, the sound of my heels clicking against the marble floor echoing through the stunned silence. I felt their eyes on me, not with grief anymore, but with disbelief. I stopped just a few feet from the two of them. I see you planned a beautiful funeral, I said, loud enough for everyone to hear. Too bad it's not mine. Gasps filled the room. I'm not dead, I continued, but they wanted me to be. I held up the folder. And I brought receipts. Vera stepped up beside me and wheeled a monitor into view. With one tap, a slideshow of evidence began to play. Screenshots of emails between Madison and Jason, outlining their plan, forged mental health records, insurance paperwork with falsified signatures, financial statements showing money being funneled into offshore accounts. The crowd murmured louder now. Reporters were already filming. One shouted, "Are you saying they tried to kill you?" I nodded. Yes. They pushed me from a helicopter to collect $5 million in insurance and take over my company. And now, I'm here to take everything back. Madison shot to her feet and lunged for the folder. You ruined everything, she screamed. Security rushed forward and restrained her before she could get close. Jason still hadn't moved. His face was ghost white. His hands gripped the sides of the podium like he might collapse. I looked them both in the eye. The lies are over. You're going to face the consequences. Phones were up everywhere now. The truth was out, and there was no stuffing it back in. A reporter asked, "Will you be pressing charges?" I glanced at the photo of me on the memorial board, the one they tried to replace me with. The version of me they wanted the world to believe had broken. Disappeared, died. I turned back to the room. Not just pressing charges, I said, I'm taking my life back. And with that, I walked out. Outside, the sun cut through the clouds, lighting up the sidewalk like a stage. Microphones, cameras, reporters, all surrounding me, calling my name. But I didn't hide. I stood tall, folder in hand, truth at my back. They tried to bury me. But I was alive, and ready to bury the lies instead. The courthouse steps were lined with cameras. Reporters jostled for position, photographers shouting my name as the doors opened with a heavy groan behind me. But I didn't flinch. Clutching the folder of evidence close to my chest, I stepped forward. Beside me was Vera, steady, composed, brilliant as always. A few days ago, she had filed for an emergency injunction, submitted criminal complaints for attempted murder, fraud, identity theft, and unlawful mental health documentation. But today wasn't just a legal battle. It was my reckoning. Inside the courtroom, everything felt heavier. The marble floors, the wood-paneled walls, even the air itself. Jason sat to one side with his lawyer, stiff in a gray suit. His eyes darted to mine and then away, unable to hold the weight of the truth. Madison sat next to him, arms crossed, lips curled into the same smug smile she wore the day she shoved me out of the helicopter. But it was faltering now. Her mask was cracking. I took my seat across from them and waited. When the judge entered, everyone stood. The bailiff called the hearing to order, a preliminary review of my motion to reinstate ownership of my company and freeze all claims made by the defendants. Then the real work began. Vera rose first. She moved like she'd done this 100 times, firm, calm, confident. Your Honor, what we present today is not simply a matter of corporate dispute. She began. It is a coordinated conspiracy. An orchestrated attempt on my client's life for financial gain. Gasps echoed from the press bench. Vera presented the documentation with precision, starting with the insurance policy Jason had taken out on me just months before the accident. Then came the forged mental health reports Madison had manufactured, falsely labeling me as delusional and paranoid. Next were the wire transfers, large sums siphoned off into private accounts under shell corporations, all leading back to them. On the projector screen, damning evidence appeared one after the next. A transcript of a message from Jason. Once she's out of the picture, we're golden. A photo of Madison's handwritten note. Doctor says she's unstable, perfect for insurance backup. Audio from a hidden recorder where Madison told someone, Emily's had a good run. It's our turn now. Their lawyers objected multiple times. The judge overruled them every time. Jason turned pale. Madison clenched her jaw so tightly I thought her teeth might break. Then came my testimony. I stood and faced the courtroom. The cameras, the crowd. My voice trembled at first, but with each word, I steadied. I built my company from nothing. I said, every client, every product, every late night, that was me. I believed in my husband. I trusted my sister. And because of that trust, I was nearly killed. I paused. No one made a sound. They pushed me from a helicopter. They thought no one would find me. They filed the insurance claim before search and rescue was even called. They gave eulogies while moving into my office. They told the world I was unstable, that I'd imagined it all. I held up the flash drive. But I wasn't imagining anything. And I have the proof. The courtroom buzzed again, whispers rippling across rows. Reporters frantically scribbled notes, some already live tweeting every word. That night, the headlines exploded. Wife survives murder plot, confronts husband and sister in court. Emily Carter returns from the dead with evidence of $5 million fraud. Family betrayal caught on tape, trial of the decade begins. By morning, Jason's company stock had plummeted. Madison's influencer deals were cancelled. Her face, once plastered across wellness brand partnerships and fashion lines, now trended beside words like fraud, attempted murder, and conspiracy. The court ordered an immediate freeze on all of their assets. My name and voting rights were reinstated on all corporate documents. I was back on the board, officially and legally. But more than that, I was heard. The judge set a formal trial date and issued restraining orders against both of them. The prosecution launched a criminal investigation. And I cooperated fully. I gave them every file Daniel had saved. Every message, every whisper they had once tried to bury. A week later, Madison tried to post an apology video. It was torn apart within minutes. Too little, too late, one user commented. Try not to push anyone off a cliff next time. Another wrote, Jason was spotted leaving a law firm with a paper bag over his head. Public sympathy had turned completely. For once, the world saw me, not as a victim, not as a name on a tombstone, but as a woman who fought back. At night, in Vera's apartment, I sat by the window with a warm mug of coffee and watched the lights of the city blinking like quiet promises. The air still stung with betrayal, but beneath it was something else, clarity, strength, and resolve. They tried to erase me. But instead, I erased their lies. The first morning after the court hearing, I woke up in Vera's apartment. Morning light slipped through the blinds, casting long streaks across the ceiling like a quiet promise. The smell of freshly brewed coffee drifted from the kitchen, and beside me sat a steaming mug Vera had left before heading to work. I sat up slowly, wrapping the blanket tighter around myself, the weight of everything still pressing on my chest. I had won, at least the first battle. I had survived. I had exposed the truth. Jason and Madison were no longer in control of my life, my name, or my company. But this victory didn't erase the scars. What they tried to take from me wasn't just money or reputation, it was trust, memories, and a part of my heart. I picked up the pen and signed the final documents restoring full control of my company. With each signature, it felt like I was breathing cleaner air again, as if every stroke of ink was pumping life back into my chest. Vera returned around noon, juggling 2 coffees and a paper bag of warm croissants. She smiled when she saw the documents neatly stacked on the counter. How does it feel? She asked, setting down the bag. I hesitated. Strange, like I'm relearning how to exist. We sat in her small kitchen, watching the city shift and hum beyond the window. I told her about the nightmare I'd had, the sound of rotor blades, Madison's cold hands, Jason's blank stare. But this time, I didn't wake up screaming. I just opened my eyes and breathed. I don't want to live like a victim anymore, I whispered. She reached across the table, squeezing my hand. You're not. You're a survivor. Over the next few days, I returned to the office, not to applause or celebration, but to quiet acknowledgement. People stared as I walked through the doors, not rudely, not with pity, but with stunned respect. The founder they thought was dead stood alive before them. I walked the halls in silence, brushing my fingers along the doors and desks. Everything looked familiar, yet different. The portraits Madison had put up of herself were gone. My desk still had a few relics, a paper crane, an old photo of me and Madison from graduation. Arms linked, smiling. I tucked it away into a drawer. Starting over wasn't about press releases or grand speeches. It was about small, firm steps. I rewrote company governance, launched a full financial audit, and held an all-staff meeting to talk about trust, values, and moving forward. I stood before my team and told them the truth, no sugarcoating, no shame. I was betrayed by the people closest to me. I said, but I'm not here for sympathy. I'm here to rebuild what we started, with integrity. The applause that followed wasn't loud or dramatic. It was heartfelt, real. That weekend, I left the city for a few days and drove to a small cabin by the lake. surrounded by towering pines and still water. There, I sat alone by the shore, a notebook in my lap. I didn't write about Jason. I didn't write about Madison. I wrote for me. You were broken, abandoned, nearly erased, but you kept breathing. You stood up. You lived, not as a victim, but as someone who gets to decide what comes next. I closed the notebook and smiled to myself. Later that day, I ran into a little girl named Ellie, the daughter of a former employee. I used to fold paper cranes for her when she was afraid of going to the dentist. This time, she handed me a tiny yellow crane, saying shyly, "You need a little luck." I took it with trembling fingers, emotion catching in my throat. Hope never really leaves us, not if we choose to hold on. That evening, as the sun spilled gold across the lake, I stood tall, the crane in my palm like a vow. I knew I might never fully forgive what was done to me. But I also knew I wouldn't let the past chain me down. My name is Selene Carter. I am still alive, I am free, and I am stronger than I've ever been. In the quiet that followed the storm, I found something deeper than revenge. I found healing. Not the kind that erases scars, but the kind that honors them. I carry my past, not as a weight, but as proof that I endured, that I rose. I am no longer a victim of their betrayal. I am the author of my own survival. And if you're reading this, know one thing: healing is possible, even after the fall.